In 1867, the United States spent $7.2 million to acquire a massive, remote stretch of Arctic wilderness. At the time, critics laughed at the government for wasting taxpayer money on what they called a polar bear garden. That heavily criticized bargain eventually transformed from a public embarrassment into a cornerstone of American strategy. Long before this transaction, the land was inhabited. Indigenous populations, like the Tlingit, maintained total independence and sovereignty over the region, building established civilizations along the coast. This dynamic shifted in 1741 with the arrival of Russian explorers. They didn't come to settle. They built a purely extraction-based economy, hunting the region's sea otters nearly to extinction for their highly valuable pelts. By treating the land exclusively as a hunting ground, the Russian Empire left the territory dangerously unpopulated and underdeveloped. By the mid-19th century, with the sea otters gone, the colony had become a financial drain and a massive strategic liability. Russia's problems extended far beyond the depleted fur trade. Following a devastating defeat by Britain and France in the Crimean War, the empire was nearly bankrupt. Their thinly stretched Alaskan colony was now entirely defenseless. Tsar Alexander II recognized that if another war broke out, British forces operating out of neighboring Canada would easily conquer the territory. To prevent their arch-rival from gaining more ground in the Pacific, Russia offered the land to the United States. On the evening of March 29, 1867, the Russian minister approached U.S. Secretary of State William Seward. Working entirely by candlelight through an all-night negotiating session, they drafted a treaty. The final price tag was about 2 cents per acre. The people actually living on that acreage were ignored. In 1869, Tlingit clan leaders formally protested to the U.S. Treasury Department, asserting their ancestral lands had been sold without their consent. The American public was equally furious, though for different reasons. Even strong supporters of westward expansion wondered why the country needed an empty icebox. Newspapers labeled the deal Seward's Folly and Wall Russia. Despite the backlash, the United States absorbed a landmass larger than Texas, California, and Montana combined. For mere pennies on the dollar, the nation expanded its geographic scale while inheriting a massive, unmapped frontier. Under early American control, the territory remained largely ignored. For decades, it operated as a sparsely populated military district, overseen by a handful of naval vessels and army outposts. That changed in 1896. The discovery of gold in the Klondike sparked a massive rush of prospectors. Thousands of people poured into the freezing mountains, rapidly shifting the public narrative regarding the territory's worth. The gold eventually dried up, but it paved the way for deeper exploration. Throughout the 20th century, the region proved to be rich in other highly profitable resources, generating massive industries around timber and commercial fisheries. The true financial anchor arrived decades later. Engineers struck immense oil fields in Prudhoe Bay, requiring the construction of massive energy infrastructure across the freezing flatlands to pump the crude southward. The land Russia once dismissed as a sucked orange actually contained staggering multi-generational wealth. The natural resources pulled from the earth ended up repaying the original $7.2 million purchase price thousands of times over. As the 20th century progressed, the primary value of the territory pivoted from economic extraction to national survival. The adversary was no longer Britain, it was the Soviet Union. Looking at a standard map, the US and the Soviet Union appear to be on opposite sides of the globe. That on a polar projection, the reality of the Cold War becomes obvious. The shortest distance for nuclear-armed bombers between the two superpowers was directly over the North Pole. To protect the mainland, the U.S. military heavily fortified the Alaskan coast. They constructed the distant early warning line and a massive network of NORAD radar installations to detect incoming strikes. Executing this strategy required immense human endurance. U.S. ground forces had to actively operate, train, and patrol in extreme, freezing Arctic conditions just to keep the defense network functional. It was an era defined by constant, high-stakes tension. Soviet aircraft, like this Tu-95 Bear bomber, regularly skirted the edges of Alaskan airspace, testing response times and probing for weaknesses. The territory Russia once sold as a liability had become America's primary, heavily fortified shield against Russia itself. In the 21st century, Alaska's value centers on pure global positioning. Owning the territory grants the U.S. exclusive operational access to the Bering Strait. It also provides the United States with formal diplomatic status as an Arctic nation, granting a seat at the table for northern geopolitical disputes. This status is becoming critical. Receding sea ice is rapidly opening new Arctic shipping routes and exposing highly valuable deep-sea mineral extraction opportunities that multiple nations are currently racing to control. To truly understand the value of this land, we have to look at what the modern world would look like if Russia had refused to sell in 1867. In one scenario, the British Empire conquers the colony, blocking the U.S. from the northern Pacific. More dangerously, if Russia kept the territory, it would become a Soviet nuclear staging ground bordering Canada, placing missile silos squarely within North America. Without the 1867 purchase, America would have been geographically contained by the British or forced to face a permanent border threat from the Soviets. Paying $7.2 million eliminated both outcomes. When early critics looked at the Alaskan wilderness, they saw nothing but ice, isolation, and wasted taxpayer money. But the physical reality of the land proved them wrong. By securing the territory, the U.S. acquired a region overflowing with resources, established a critical military vantage point, and cemented its long-term global positioning. Sometimes, the most valuable investments require generations to reveal their true worth.